Hello, Hans. How are you?
Ah, hello, Jeff. Well,
Hey,
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
very good. So, Hans, I wonder if you could share with me, for the benefit of the audience, just a very brief summary of your spiritual journey. What's brought you to this place?
Okay. Well, I think the very first sign of a spiritual fate in my life was that happened about when I was about 10 or 12 years, when I had three professional wishes. And one of those wishes was to be a bridge builder. And the second was to be a geologist. And the third was to be an astronaut. And I think now, looking back, it's very obvious that those wishes were not on the material plane. It's symbolic. And but this was the beginning. This was the first sign of my spiritual fate. And then, well, then in my younger years, nothing much happened. I wasn't extraordinary at all. I had no spiritual experiences as far as I can remember. And then when I was about 17, I discovered the world of literature. It began with Hermann Hesse. Then it passed over to C.G. Jung, the psychologist, this famous Swiss psychologist. And well, an important phase was my 6 months in London, when I was outside Switzerland, when I left the narrow world of where I grew up for the first time for 6 months. And this was really a transformative experience, because actually I could call it as the awakening of my inner world, of my spiritual life. I happened to come across Colin Wilson, whom you know. And later on, when I came back from London, I came across Krishnamurti. And this was the first time that, I read the first page of a little booklet of his called For the Young. And it was the first time when reading a book, a spiritual book, when I had the feeling, this is it. And so it was. Krishnamurti was a very important influence during my 20s. And there were some others, Friedrich Weinreb, and Helmut Wolff, and the American writer Henry Miller, strangely enough. And then I began my studies with the intention, the seemingly strange intention, to find the mystery. I studied histories and English literature as a subsidiary subject, and for the people whom I told this, there were very few of them, it sounded strange to begin studies with this intention to find the mystery. And of course, in my studies themselves, I didn't find it, because history is above all a study of political and economic history. And I was very unsatisfied. This was not what I expected to find. And so I began studying for myself the spiritual history, mainly of Europe, with the aim to find the highest what mankind had found out, what mankind had produced, what the best heads of mankind yes, had explored and laid down in books or words. And then I was in a very bad state when the end of my studies approached, because I had no idea what to do in my coming life, in my professional life. I had severe psychological problems. Actually, I felt near madness, and it was very, very difficult. And inwardly, I had extreme experiences. I remember one night when I had seemingly hundreds or even thousands of dreams. It was like in an LSD dream. And well, it was really difficult. And then I decided, I made a very important decision. I was asked to be the assistant of my main professor, and I said no, which was a kind of patricide. He hated me after that. And I also didn't want to write the thesis. And when I had done the final exam, I had the feeling after that, for months to come, that I had died in a way, and still I was living. This was a very strange feeling. And just imagine, about 2 weeks after my final exam, I came across Sri Aurobindo. And this happened via the famous book by Satprem, a French student of Sri Aurobindo and Mothers. It was his famous biography of Sri Aurobindo called The Adventure of Consciousness. And so it all began.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Hans. Fascinating journey. So your journey, just so I'm clear, it was mainly through literature up until this point. You didn't meet, for instance, Colin Wilson in London, and you didn't, or did you? And did you meet Krishnamurti, or were you just reading them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good question. No, actually, Colin Wilson, I didn't meet, but I met Krishnamurti. You know, there were these Sahnen camps in Switzerland.
Yes.
And I was very astonished and overjoyed when I heard that Krishnamurti had his camps in Switzerland, because I had only read his book. I had no idea that he was in Switzerland. And so I attended his camps twice for 3 weeks. And this was quite an experience. And of course, I had my inner experiences. You know, I think I can say that my psychic being was very awake in my 20s. Actually, the real inner start of my spiritual journey happened via dreams.
Yes.
And this was my vehicle, I can say. It didn't happen during daytime, it happened in my dreams. And perhaps in altered states of consciousness, in trance states, which came from time to time during my wakeful life. But these dreams, they really told me or showed me that there was something else. I had some extraordinary, beautiful music dreams. Actually, once I dreamt the hymn to the son of the pharaoh Ichnaton. I don't know what's it in English. You know, this pharaoh who introduced this monotheistic religion in Egypt. It's a poetic work of art. It's not very long. It's called The Hymn to the Sun. Do you know it?
I know of it, but I have never read it.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if I had ever read it. At any rate, I heard it sung by a female voice. In my dream, it was completely dark. And I remember it came from the right side. And it was so incredibly beautiful. It was beyond words. It was not an earthly beauty. It was more than that. It was the well, there are just no words for it. And actually, it was so beautiful that I lost consciousness in my dream, because it seems I couldn't stand it. And there were some other music dreams where the same happened. It was so other kinds of music, classical and other kinds. And again, I fainted. It was so beautiful. And then there were about 2 dreams with angel choirs. And in one dream, this angel choir, it came from an abyss. After I had first jumped up in the air, and then I fell back to the ground and turned myself around my axis for about 6 times. And I knew that each turning meant a kind of development I had to do in my life. And then this incredible angel choir came from the abyss. And I remember 2 words: no time, no space. Also, a region telling me that there was a region beyond time and space. And so this awoke a longing in myself. I knew that there was another world which was not from this world, and so my contact was via beauty, the beauty of music. So, yeah.
Beautiful. And so in your 20s, you encountered Satprem's biography of Sri Aurobindo, The Adventure of Consciousness. And
actually, immediately after my studies, after that decision. And also, perhaps I can mention this, I was so desperate that I don't know, for months or perhaps for a year, I shrieked inwardly. I shrieked and shrieked. And somehow my cry was heard. And also my decision was rewarded. My decision not to follow an academic career, which made no sense for me, because I searched for a meaning, for a purpose, for a higher purpose.
Right. So when you read Satprem's book about Sri Aurobindo, what happened? Because that obviously, reading that book had a significant impact on your life, as we will explore. So what happened when you read that book? Did you know immediately that a new order of possibility had opened up for you?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that it was the same as with Krishnamurti's book. I read the first page, and I think I also saw the picture of Sri Aurobindo, and again I knew this is it. I mean, this is more than a rational experience. It was a knowing. This is it. And here I have to go back a little to my studies, because during my studies, when I studied the spiritual history of Europe, I always had the intention to find the highest what mankind had found out. And when I came across this book, I saw, well, this is it, what I was looking for. This is really the highest. I can't imagine. I had at least I hadn't found anything like that. It sounded, it sounded like the future. And you must know that I always loved, especially in my younger years, began perhaps at the age of 14, 15, 16, I read science fiction literature. And I was fascinated by it. And, when I read this biography, I thought, well, this is the fulfillment of all my reading of science fiction literature. I mean, this is the future. I had the really a very strong feeling. This is the future. This is the ultimate thing. What any human being has done and found out and described.
So can you tell us, Hans, a little bit, because one of our points of contact is I'm very inspired by and fascinated by Sri Aurobindo, and I did some exploration of Aurobindo a couple of decades ago, and then kind of became reacquainted with Sri Aurobindo and even more so maybe the mother, his spiritual partner, teaching partner. And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about, Sri Aurobindo and what he taught, what you learned when you read The Adventures of Consciousness.
Well, I mean, what impressed me was I mean, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, you can't really separate them, because I mean they are the two in one, and their spiritual mission was to bring a new level into Earth's evolution, and this fascinated me. I mean, it's not only philosophy. All his works, which comprise about 15,000 pages now in the last edition of his collected works. I mean, all his works are just the description of his inner experiences and what he did, and the main thing, what he and mother wanted to do, and what they actually did and achieved, was to bring down the supramental, this new layer, this new level of consciousness down to Earth. And this I found fascinating, also as a historian, because it's strange. I studied history, but after my studies, I didn't consider myself any longer as a historian, because I did other things. I taught languages, and I founded a language school. Now I have a translation agency. I've had a translation agency for about 20 years. But I've lost the thread now.
You were talking about bringing down the supramental to Earth, and you were saying that as a historian you found it interesting.
Yeah, as a historian, right? Exactly. Here I lost the thread, or I digressed, because I think very, very few people on Earth know about that date of the 29th of February, 1956. And I mean, as a historian, I must say, this is probably the most important date in the history of the Earth, because then, actually, this was 6 years after Sri Aurobindo's death, and Mother continued his work with the help of Sri Aurobindo beyond the veil. And after on that 29th of February 1956, the supramental consciousness came down to Earth, into Earth's atmosphere, and with that a new phase, a completely new phase in the human evolution began, because they had brought down a completely new energy, the highest energy which had ever seen the world. Perhaps the rishis brought it down to about, according to Sri Aurobindo, about 7,000 years ago. But the aim of Sri Aurobindo and Mother was to make this new consciousness accessible to the whole world, and their aim was, in contrast to most of Indian spirituality, their aim was not, their ultimate aim was not the nirvana, leaving the earth, which they considered as a kind of escape, because I mean, it may be part, and it probably is a part of the whole journey, but then they wanted to go back to Earth and bring down what they had found, this supramental energy, down to Earth and change the fate of man, and not only his spiritual, his inner spiritual life, his mental life, more than mental, but till down to the body. And this was the really new thing, that they wanted to transform the body, that they wanted to bring down this supramental energy into their body and transform the very cells of the body. This was really remarkable, because nobody, it seems, had ever tried to do that.
Interesting. So you're saying it was February 29th?
Yep.
1956.
Yeah.
You know, the supramental consciousness was brought to Earth.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Sri Aurobindo said the rishis had done this 7,000 years ago, and the rishis were those mysterious, that mysterious culture of beings who wrote the Indian Vedas,
the Rig Veda.
The Rig Veda, right? So,
yeah,
arguably the oldest surviving spiritual text on Earth.
Yeah, it's probably true. Yeah,
and so in 1956, the supramental was brought to Earth. The mother was still alive then. Sri Aurobindo was no longer alive. Now you realize that this is the kind of thing that people will hear, and they'll be skeptical. They'll wonder how you know and what evidence there is. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, it's very obvious that scientists, rational scientists, they just won't believe it, because I mean, it sounds too fantastical, and I mean, and also the fact that Mother, after this happened, after Mother brought down this supramental consciousness down to Earth, when talking to a disciple 2 or 3 days after the event, she said, well, you know, only 3 or 4 people have noticed anything of the supramental consciousness coming down. which was astonishing, because I mean, you would expect that well, that it would be overwhelming for the people there, because, you know, it happened on the playground where she held her Wednesday classrooms, French classrooms for the ashram youth, but other ashramites took part too in that, and only one person there noticed something, and three others outside, and it's so this still makes it more difficult to to find a proof. But Mother made an interesting comparison. You know, when the mind, the mental faculty, the thinking faculty came down onto Earth, into the world of the apes, probably no ape was aware of this new vibration. And so you can compare this to this new supramental energy. It was a completely new level of vibration. And so it was just invisible, unhearable for the people there. And it took some years and till it manifested on Earth in various ways. And I mean, another proof is, of course, what the mother lived after that. I mean, this happened in 1956, and then soon after that, her yoga of the cells began, because her aim was the supramentalization of the body, and to bring down the supramental energy into her body. And during that process, which lasted till her passing away in 1973, so about 15 years, during that those years, a lot of things happened so incredible that without this supramental energy, this was just not have been possible. What happened there? But still, I'm very well aware that what I said just now won't convince any professional skeptics.
Right.
Another proof might be, you know, for example, already during the First World War, and then during the Second World War, and then at the beginning of the 60s, in 1962, when there was when the Chinese invaded India, I think again in 1965, Sri Aurobindo and Mother, they intervened in world history, because they cared for the whole world, and they knew it was all important now to that this coming down of the supramental energy was not crushed by political events. I mean, if Hitler had succeeded, then human freedom would have been destroyed for centuries, perhaps millennia. And so what Sri Aurobindo and Mother did, they intervened in rather sensational, rather sensationally. I mean, I can tell you this because we are here among ourselves, and so there will not be reactions saying, well, this is completely impossible. But I can tell you one example. What few people know is that Hitler, he followed. He was a kind of medium, and he followed an entity which appeared to him in a shining armor, and he followed what this entity told him. And I don't know when was this, in about 1943 or 1942 rather. Mother took the identity of this being whom Hitler followed, and she told him that he should invade Russia, that he should go on that famous Russian campaign, and this was the beginning of the end. This was one example. Another example was in Dünkirchen, Dunkirk in English. Dunkirk it's a place in the Normandy, the French Normandy, and the English troops in the Second World War, the English troops were encapsulated there. About, I think I remember, about 300,000 soldiers, and the situation was very, very critical. If Goering had succeeded to have his aircraft, about 3,000 bombers, start, well, this would have been the end for the British troops. But there were some fog for several days, and Sri Aurobindo later made a remark. He didn't say exactly it was he, but for the people who knew him, it was obvious that he was responsible for it. So he had produced this fog so that the Goering's bomber couldn't start, and so the British troops were evacuated to their home country, and so it could go on. So these are two examples, and actually George van Rechem, whose complete works I translated with sometimes with two other people. In one book, one or two books with one other translator. He wrote a last book which remains untranslated. It's about these background, I don't remember the title. It's about the Second World War and Hitler, and because George van Rechem wanted to find out if those two stories, there are more to them, if they corresponded to historical truth, and he did his studies incredible for 4 years, and it nearly killed him because he had bad dreams during that time, because you can imagine what this brought with it. And he wrote, first his book comprised about 1,500 pages, then he reduced it to about 500 or 600 pages, and it was just a confirmation of what I've just told you. Also the result of what he found out in.
Interesting. Well, I find all of these things fascinating, and I'm too much of a rationalist to hold them in a literal truth context, but I don't actually believe in literal truth anyway. So, I hold a much more symbolic understanding of truth, and I feel like in our culture, because we are so materialistically inclined, we we think of truth only in terms of facts.
Mhm.
And facts means correspondence with a fixed reality. But I don't really believe in a fixed reality. I believe in much more in a symbolic reality in which everything is symbolic of other things. And so when I hear a fact like on a certain date the supramental came to Earth, I don't I know some people hold it as a kind of literal fact. I don't tend to hold it as a literal fact, because I don't believe that I understand the nature of reality well enough to hold something like that. I feel like the way that I would hold it as a fact would not be subtle enough to capture the reality of it. But I feel it symbolically that something happened, whether it was on that exact date or not is kind of immaterial to me, but some level of consciousness opened up, and that's what was then explored through, say, the counterculture movements of the 1960s, and right up to the present day. You can kind of imagine that some new possibility opened up, and there's different ways to look at that and different ways to express it. But it does feel like some higher potentials in consciousness sometime, and it's interesting you mentioned the Second World War, because it seems generally that sometime after the Second World War, the Second World War was such a devastating moment in Western history, where the ideals of the Enlightenment, of the progressive idea that we could just develop ourselves and develop our technologies and perfect human life on Earth, that had been driving humankind for a few hundred years, and it had such an optimistic spirit, suddenly crashed into the most atrocious war, really, in some ways, at least in scale, that had ever occurred before. And people saw, all of the technology that was supposed to make life so beautiful and so perfect for so many people, our higher mental faculties that we had been developing, suddenly we realized they could be used for evil as easily as they could be used for good, on an enormous scale. And something cracked, I think, in consciousness. And so lots of things began to happen. And so that all coincides perfectly with this sense that the supramental was brought to Earth.
Because the supramental is a harmonizing energy. It harmonizes the opposites, and it is an all-powerful energy, but it's also a harmonizing energy. It because its power is so strong that it can also restrain its power and finds automatically the way to relax situations which seem not able to be relaxed. It's
beautiful, yes.
So it needed this new energy, because our mind, even the higher faculties of mind, because probably that you could also call Sri Aurobindo the cartographer of consciousness, because he differentiates between the mind, and then there is the higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, and then comes the overmind, which creates the bridge between the higher levels of mind and the supermind, the supramental. And so this supermind was capable of finding a solution to the seemingly unsolvable problems of our world. When I told you about those interventions in the Second World War, and also when the Chinese invaded India, it was to answer your question about the supermind. Well, it about the proof for the supermind. I mean, this was only possible via a power which was more than the powers known before. A normal consciousness would just not have had the power to do this. It took an extraordinary new power to do this.
Yes, and I'm thinking again, because as I said, over the last couple of years, I've kind of become reacquainted with Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and I tend not to look at things in terms of whether they're true or not true. I don't think it's a useful way to think, because I don't really think as I said before, I don't think in terms of correspondence to reality. I think of things in terms of opening potentials. Mm-hmm. And when I explore Sri Aurobindo's teachings and the teachings of the Mother, and I allow myself to become absorbed in the energies and the ideas that they were inspired by and sharing, I see that opens up, there was a world of possibility that they were opening up on Earth. And
definitely.
And the descriptions of the supermind, of the supramental arrival on Earth, these are all metaphors that help bring that energy of possibility into your life. It's not, I think if we get too caught up in the fact-finding aspect of this, then we're still very much planted in the rationalistic materialism that we are evolving beyond. And instead we explore the possibilities that open up. So that I'm in the middle of an exploration, my second time around with Sri Aurobindo, and this time including the Mother, because she wasn't a big part of my studies before. And I'm feeling the opening of possibility. And I think a few months ago, I had a very powerful experience, which happened not exactly in a dream, but it started in a dream. And then I woke up and the dream continued, and I was in bed, and I felt like my body was like a mountain on the earth, and it was longing for and reaching toward the sun. And the sun represented something like the supramental.
Yeah, it's the usual, one of the pictures that Sri Aurobindo and Mother use for the supramental, the sun, the supramental sun. Yes.
So there you go. So the sun was calling me up, and I was rising up out of the earth like a mountain. Mm-hmm. And at the same time that I was rising toward the supramental, toward the sun's rays were entering me and permeating the earth. And what I realized then, because what I had been contemplating leading up to this was this distinction between involution and evolution. And I felt that very symbolically, but also very graphically for me, and even viscerally, because I felt it. Mm-hmm. I felt the simultaneity of involution and evolution, that the earth, the three-dimensional being that I am, that is one with the earth, that is one with manifestation, reaching, longing into the sun, and the sun's energy and rays penetrating my being,
Yeah.
and transforming me, like you said, at the level of my cells, at the actual physicality of my. And I was stunned. I woke up and I was in this for a few minutes, and then I just laid there and I was stunned by the power of that vision. And I felt like in moments like that, it's as if I'm being given a transmission directly from, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, that somehow
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
allowed that vision to occur so that I would,
Yeah.
at that deeper, more symbolic level, viscerally understand what they were teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this was it. And you talk about it using the term vision, but probably, so as you describe it to me, it was probably more than a vision. You also used the word viscerally. So,
Yes.
and this is typical because this going down to the bodily level, to the physical level, and so yeah, this makes sense. Mhm.
It's very exciting. So, Hans, we are going to need to continue this conversation at a different
Great.
time. But
Mhm.
I've really enjoyed speaking to you today.
So did I.
What I want to do is talk to you again and go more into Sri Aurobindo's map of consciousness,
Mhm.
and his vision of how the supramental will transform the earth. I just really enjoy talking to you, Hans.
So do I, really, and I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about my favorite subject. And you must know that for years, for decades, I was completely alone. I had no spiritual companions to whom with whom I could talk about this subject. And now suddenly you have given me this opening, and it's just incredible, amazing for me that I can now talk. And there is a bridge between Europe and America, and I mean it's for me it's miraculous, you know.
It's amazing, Hans, and just you've translated, is it 20 books by and about? I guess not by, but about Sri Aurobindo's teaching.
Well, actually, um, I translated two books by Satprem. One, there is a novel among these two, Gringo, and the first book of his letters, and then I translated together with other people partly the complete works by George van Rechem. And then the 6 volumes by Sujata Naha, Satprem's companion, about mother's life, called Mother's Chronicles.
So
Yeah,
you translated, so the book that I've read twice now because I love it so much is
yeah,
book 3 of the Mother's Chronicles, Mira the Occultist. So you
yeah,
translated that.
yeah. Those 6 volumes, and actually, well, this touched me so much that Mira the Occultist, the 3rd volume, moved you, because actually when I came back from India with about more than 100 books. Actually, they arrived later by sea package, and then when I was reading that 3rd volume, something in me said very clearly, well, this must be translated. People must know about this.
Mm-hmm.
This is so extraordinary. And so it began, and then I applied for being allowed to translate the works, and Yes, and then, of course, I was part of the whole translation of the 13 volumes of the agenda. Actually, I began with the third volume. I translated one volume by myself, another volume partly, and the other volumes I proofread because, yeah. So this was more or less what I did, and two volumes by Medananda, who is a disciple of Sri Aurobindo's. And perhaps if I may conclude this, if you have still 1 minute.
Sure.
There is a story in that book by Medananda, in one of those two books which I translated. Actually, he lived there on the southern islands, Südseeinseln, you know, Hawaii, Maori, Hawaii, Moorea, and Tahiti, etc. He lived there because he had emigrated from Germany. Well, and then he tells a story. He was buying things in a marketplace, and then he fainted. I don't know why, and he didn't know either. At any rate, he awoke on another planet, it seems, and the people there, the beings there, asked him where he came from, and he answered them, "Well, I came from the planet Earth." And then they said, in astonishment, "Oh, Sri Aurobindo's planet."
That's hysterical. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is very funny.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Hans, thank you for sharing with us today. I look forward to speaking to you again. I'm very excited about this. You know, I feel like we're lucky to have someone with your breadth of knowledge of Sri Aurobindo to, you know, act as our guide through what is a large body of work. So it can be intimidating for people to get started in. And so,
yes, but perhaps if this goes on, I could mention some reading stuff which is easy, also good for people who start, because well, some things read like an adventure story, and actually this was my approach. For me, the whole thing is a huge adventure.
Yes, and the book you already mentioned, Satprem's Adventures in Consciousness.
Yeah, and actually the adventure of consciousness is one line in Sri Aurobindo's epic poem Savitri.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's wonderful. So we will pick up this conversation again, Hans. And again, I want to thank you so much for everything that you've shared today.
Well, I thank you. It's really an honor and a great pleasure to more than a pleasure to be able to speak about that subject. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much, Hans. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, great. Okay.
Bye now.
Bye, Jeff.